All right, we'll just get started. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. All right. You guys see my screen? Okay. All right, so last time we left off taking a look at how your payment could change if you didn't make any payments, right? How would your balance that you owe on your credit card, how would that be affected if you weren't making the payments? How would it start to grow? So that was number one, right? So that was the example there. We did a couple things there. We found the monthly interest. We were able to use the monthly interest to then utilize that as a tool to help us find out how much it grows by each month, right? We did a recursive formula to help us find out what do I owe next month if I know what I owe right now. And then, right, how much you would owe if after a whole year you didn't make any payments, right? And then we found the APY. So then the next scenario ended up being that what happens if, again, you're not making payments, but then they're charging you a late fee, right? So we were able to find out what those first 3 months, what you would owe after those first 3 months. Okay, but they still want us to kind of look for a couple of other things because they want us to kind of redo parts A and C from number one. So we already did part A basically, which is the 3 different months after the first, second, and third month. Now they want us to use a recursive formula to show how to calculate the credit card balance from 1 month to the next. Okay, so if we kind of build off of the recursive formula that we had last time, right? Last time we had this recursive formula that said, if I know my now balance, if I know what I owe now, I can multiply times 1.015. And the 1.015 comes from basically the 1.5% that you're paying per month, right? Because the entire year you're supposed to pay 18% APR. Okay, so then we've broken that up over 12 months. And so then you're just multiplying your balance times that monthly percentage to get what you will owe next month. Okay. Now, the difference between that one and the one that we're working on now is that now there's an additional fee that gets charged on top of the fact, right? So you can kind of see it that there's a pattern here where I have my balance, which is what I have now. Let's kind of highlight here a couple things. This right here represents the now balance, right? This is the balance that you currently have, and then you multiply it times the interest rate, which is always the same. But then after that, you would add it to your fee. Okay, so in that case, we're going to be able to build it ourselves, right? So we can, and then the last thing is like, then it equals what your next month's balance will be, right? So there's this kind of like consistency in the pattern. So we can go ahead and say that for part B, if you take your now balance and then you multiply that balance by 1.015, and then you add the late fee of $35, that will equal your future balance or your next month's balance, right? And so then this right here represents the recursive formula for your balance. Okay, so you could keep going in the way that we've done it, and you can take it up as far as many months as you need to find out what that balance will be month after month. Okay, any questions on that so far? Okay, all right. So for part C, what they're asking us for part C now is, I have it right here. It says, what formula shows how to calculate the credit card balance after X monthly billing cycles? Okay. All right. So last time, let's take a look at what we got for C, and let's see how that will change now that we have this fee being added to it. Okay, so last time we built a formula here. Our balance B of X would be equal to the initial times 1 plus the rate. The rate was the 0.18%. And if you divide that by 12, the reason why you divide it by 12 is because we have a monthly compounding rate. And then we left it as to the power of X, because X would be representing the number of months, right? So this is the formula that we got last time when there was no fee, there was no penalty that you were going to have to pay future interest on, right? So you were only paying interest on the initial balance. Okay, so what happens then is if now this fee is added onto it, it's a little bit more complicated because initially you started with just the balance, and the balance you were paying interest on that. But then the moment you start adding these fees, well then let's say January, right? We start with January. You have a balance of 1,500. You miss a payment, right? So then they tack on $35 on top of the interest that added up. Now the next month, not only are you paying interest on the balance, but then you're also paying interest on the fee, right? Because the fee has now been tacked onto your balance, and you're paying interest on that. So you got to think of this almost like a recurring payment in a sense, the recurring payment process that we looked at in the previous section, where we had that pretty long formula, right, that accounted in the initial and then the recurring. So you got to think of like that $35 as a recurring fee type of situation, so that in the event that you continue to miss payments, then they're going to keep adding that $35 in there, and you're going to have to keep paying interest on those $35. Okay, so let me just kind of review what that formula is. And in fact, let's go back and just kind of recap it real quick, because that happened in lesson 1. So let me find it real quick. Actually, no, not this one. Maybe it was the previous one. Okay, yeah, I'm talking about this formula right here, right? So where we had to, actually not even that one, it was actually more complicated than that. It was this one. No. Where was it? Oh, here it is. This is the one I'm talking about. Okay, this is the one I'm talking about because if you look at the first half of the equation, F equals, right here, this one in black, F equals your initial, right? That would be the $1,500, the initial balance. You're multiplying times at some rate over the compounding periods, right? That's what is calculating your interest based on the balance. But then every month, because they're tacking on this fee of $35, now you're responsible for paying interest on those $35 fees as well. So it becomes a situation of I'm paying interest not just on one thing, but I'm paying interest on the other thing that keeps getting tacked on month after month. Okay, so we're gonna borrow this one to help us answer part C for number 3. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so kind of our foundational formula here is F equals A times, actually, no, it's I, sorry. I times 1 plus the radius over 2 into small plus and it's in parentheses 1 plus R minus 1. This is the one we're going to use to build off of it, but it's not exactly like this again because after how many years this is happening typically, in scenario C, what we looked at was after X number of billing cycles. Okay, so some of these powers that are N times T, we can just replace them with X. And that's what we're gonna do here, because we're just trying to find out after how many months, right? We're not gonna take this off to the point of like years, right? So a couple things we can do to adjust it. So we can simplify this a little bit, say that this is final value is still the initial times 1 plus the rate over n, but this time now it's to the power of x. Okay, plus a to 1 plus r over n to the power of x minus 1 all over r over n. Okay, where in this case our x is the number of months. All right. Okay, so now let's plug in what we know, right? So we know that if we wanted to find out a final value of how much money we owe on that credit card, if we're not making payments and late fees are being added onto it, we know that the initial balance was 1,500. You have 1 plus the rate of 0.18 divided by 12 because it's compounded monthly, and then this is to the power of x plus, right? And now that's the big part of the interest that you're going to pay, but now you're adding on the little part. The little part is those $35 that every month, right, they're throwing into your account as a late fee, and you got to find out, well, how much interest is being charged from that. So then if my A value in this case is the recurring fee, then that's where the 35 comes in, right? So plus 35 times, I have 1 plus my rate of 0.18 over 12 to the x power minus 1 all over, and again the same rate of 0.18 over 12. Okay. All right. So it's still kind of messy. Definitely want to clean this up a little more. If you notice that the 0.18 over 12 is a calculation we've done before. In fact, let's just find out what that is so we can go ahead and clean this up even further. So we have 0.18 divided by 12. That's 0.015. Okay, so we can go ahead and make those adjustments on this formula to clean it up. So 1,500. In this case, it's 1 plus 0.015, so we can just leave it as 1.015 to the x plus 35 times, and then again 0.18 over 12 is 1.015, so that'll be 1.015 to the x minus 1 all over, and then 0.18 over 12 would be 0.015. All right, and so that then gives you an idea. If I wanted to know what my balance would be if I missed payments for X number of months, I can just take the number of months that I missed my payments by, throw it in for X, and then I can find out what my balance will be after a given amount of time. Okay. All right. Any questions so far? We're doing okay? All right. So that kind of wraps us up for number 2, right? Since they only wanted us to redo parts A through C. Okay, so that's enough for now. Okay. All right. So now let's kind of move on over here to number 4, or actually number 3. Yeah, number 3. Okay. So how would your answers to problems 1, parts A through C change if the credit card company charged, in addition to the late fee each month, and after the second missed payment, they increased the APR to 2.7% compounded monthly? Okay. So let's think about what's happening, right? So in number 2, you didn't get the APR increased. It was just the fee that they were adding on, right? But now after 2 missed payments, the credit card company says like, okay, we're going to charge you late fees, but we're also going to increase the APR to the maximum, the penalty, because you're not making payments on time. So it's kind of like a punishment. All right, so let's think about part A. Okay, part A is the part where we try to calculate each month. Right, let's go back to number 1. Right, number 1 is saying find out what the balance of the person outstanding balance would be after 1 month, 2 months, and 3 months. Okay, and again, it's a $1,500 initial balance. So very similar to kind of how we did number 2. Okay. All right. So how would it change if, in addition, it's after the second month, right? So the first 2 months, we're not going to change the APR because the penalty APR has not gone into effect. What we want here is just to show what are we looking at in terms of the first 2 months. Then after the second month, we can then change the APR. But for now, we're keeping it as the regular 18%. Okay, so for month 1, okay, it's still just 1,500 times your APR, your monthly APR, plus the penalty here. Okay, so this should be exactly the same thing as what we got across over here on number 2, right? So that would be 1557 with 50 cents. Okay. All right. Then month 2 comes around. Okay. It says that they will increase the APR after the second missed payment. Okay. So for month 2, this is still like, okay, this is still falls within the same rate that you started with. So the starting balance for month 2, 1557 with 50 cents, you still get to multiply this by 1.015. Okay, that's the 18% divided by the 12 months. And then you add the penalty of 35 to it. Okay, so again, nothing has changed at this point. So we should get the same final balance as what we got in number 2. And that final balance was 1615 with 86 cents. Okay, so now month 3 here, this is the part where then we have to make a change, because as of month 3, now there's been 2 missed payments. So now they're going to keep the fee, but then they're going to increase your APR, right? So those 2 things have to be taken into account now. So your starting balance for month 3 was 1615 with 86 cents. Okay, this time, okay, what is it that you're going to multiply by? Well, because the APR has increased to 27%, but it's still compounded monthly, right? You have to find out, well, what percentage of that is it going to be for the 3rd month, okay? Just for that 1 month. So then we know that anytime you're multiplying here, it's 1 plus the rate over the compounding period, right? So then in this case, the rate has now changed because it's up to 27%. So for us, that's going to become 0.27 for the R value. Okay, so 1615.86 times 1 plus 0.27 divided by 12, right? Because it's still compounded monthly. So you just want to know what's the percentage I have to multiply by for the 1 month. Okay, so let's go ahead and simplify this down. 0.27 divided by 12. You're looking at 0.0225, okay? $1.022. And then that's going to equal for us. Oh, I'm sorry. So then that's just the rate that you're going to multiply by. But then remember, as of month 3, you're still paying that penalty. So it's that $35 fee. Okay, so notice how we've adjusted here that the rate that you're paying is now significantly more, right? If in the first 2 months, let's say that the percent was 0.015 that you were paying, that's really only 1.5% of interest. Versus now that you've gone up to the penalty, what you're paying now is 2.25% of interest per month, right? So that's a pretty big increase in terms of percentage. And so now let's see what that final value, whoa, didn't mean to do that. Let's see what that final value after the third month is going to be in terms of the amount that you owe. So you got 1615.86 times 1.0225. Okay, so that would be how much you owe just in terms of the interest rate, but then now you have to add your fee. So after 3 months, right, where now they've moved your penalty APR up, 1687 with 22 cents. Okay, so let's compare this value with the end of the third month with just fees. Right, let's see. Right, if you're comparing it to this last month from number 2, 1675 with 10 cents was what you would have owed if the APR would have stayed the same. But once they increase your APR to the penalty, now there's an increase of about $12, right? Just by moving your interest up by almost one full percentage, not even, it's about 0.75% that it's moved up by, right? It has an effect on that, okay? All right. Any questions so far? We doing okay? All right. Okay, so number number 3, parts A, B, and C, they're similar, but they're kind of complicated in terms of how to build them, because you have to consider that the first month and the second month follow something consistent, and then the third month it's like completely different. So we're just gonna kind of keep it simple for now. It's kind of a complex situation in terms of like how to handle the formula. I think for now it's just kind of important just to be able to keep track of like what is it that the interest rates do and what do the late fees do to your balances month after month. Okay, I think that's more important to know than to be able to like build a formula for yourself. That's gonna do it for you. Okay. All right, so let's kind of jump over to number 5. If I can move my screen, give me a sec. Okay. Okay, so number 5 is kind of a scenario in which you're going to try to find out if I make the following payments, but I also make purchases, right? How much do I owe? How much interest do I have to pay on this stuff? Okay, so that's what we're going to do for number 5. All right, so it's a little more like applicable, right? So one of the things to take into account moving forward is that amount that you are subject to a finance charge just simply means that it's an amount that you're going to have to pay interest on. Okay, so how do you calculate that? Well, you take your previous balance, and let's say you owe something, but you make a payment to the credit card, right? So let's say you owe 1,000, but you made a $500 payment, right? So now really you only owe 500, but let's say you went and you bought yourself some shoes, so maybe you spent like $70. So now those purchases now take you back up to about 570, right? So that means that what you have to pay interest on is on the $570, okay? Because that's how much is basically what you owe, all right? So suppose Anita has a credit card with an APR of 16% compounded monthly. Her current monthly credit card statement shows a balance of $400, Okay, in response to which she pays $80. Okay, so she has a current balance of 400 and she pays 80. Okay, in the following month, okay, month one, she makes charges amounting to $185. Okay, so this is her situation. So she started with 400, she pays 80, but then she went and she bought $185 worth of, stuff. Okay, when she receives her next statement, Anita makes a payment of $100 to reduce the new balance, and then she makes a charge totaling 75. Okay, so complete a table like the following. All right, so let's kind of begin here by filling in what we know, starting with that previous balance. Okay, so the previous balance of what she owes. So in this case, all right, let's think. All right, month one, right? So she has a balance of 400. So in here we want 400. That's the balance, right, that she currently has. And in response, she pays 80, right? So, okay, she pays $80. All right. But then she makes purchases, right? She makes charges to the card of 185. All right. So we want to know, what is that new balance, or how much does she has to pay in terms of finance charges, and what is her new balance? Okay, so kind of on the side over here, let's first think about, well, what is it that she owes? Because if she had a previous balance of 400 and then she makes a payment, so she's going to subtract 80, right? So then that tells you that she, at the moment, she owes 320. Okay, but then she goes and she makes purchases of $185. So to this, she now adds 185. So now she has $505 that she owes to the credit card now. Okay, so she made a small dent, but then she went and racked it up one more time. All right, so then what does she has to pay a finance charge on? Well, she has to pay finance charges on the $505 here, okay? So here in the finance charge, it'll be 505, and we're gonna multiply this times the monthly rate, right? The monthly interest that she would have to pay in this case, okay? So where do we find that information and how do we use it? Well, the APR here is 16%, so it's 16% per year, but it's compounded monthly. So then that tells us that we need to find that rate divided by the number of months in a year. So what we're looking at is 0.16 divided by 12. Okay, and then that should tell us what monthly percentage she's paying on her balances. So 0.16 over 12 is 0.01333. Okay, so we'll leave it like that for now. Hopefully that's good enough to round it to something somewhat accurate. All right, so the finance charge, okay, the finance charge, just the amount that's going to charge in terms of interest, okay, we can leave it here as 1.0. I'm sorry, no, I got that wrong. 0.01333. Okay, so what is the finance charge? What is it that she has to pay in terms of interest? Well, basically it's this number here. We can multiply that by 505. Okay, so then for this month only, she would have to pay $6.73 in interest. Okay, so let me go ahead and put that here. 673. You guys can't see that. So it's 673 is the total finance charge. All right. So then what is the new balance? Well, the new balance would be, well, how much she owed on the credit card as 505, but now she has to add on the 673. Okay. So that's going to push her up to 511 with 73 cents, right? And so that is the new balance on the account. Okay. All right. Are there questions up to that point? We're okay so far? Okay, so then let's think about now what would happen if month 2, right? So month 1 we took care of, we found out how much she has to pay in interest, how much her balance increased by, right? Because even though she made a payment, she made purchases much greater than in those $80. So now she has this new balance of 511.73. So that new balance then carries over into the beginning of month 2, right? When the credit card company starts calculating how much this girl is going to have to pay, currently it's sitting at 511 with 73 cents. Okay. And so now the scenario, we have to continue to read from here. Right. So when she receives her next statement, Anita makes a payment of 100 to reduce the new balance. Okay. So she's going to make a payment of 100. And she charges totaling $75. Okay. So even though she said $100 payment, she went and she spent $75. Okay. All right, so now we have to calculate a little bit to find out, well, how much money does she have to pay a finance charge on? Okay, so if she had 511.73 and she makes a payment of 100, then you can subtract 100 from this. So then that puts you at 411 with 73 cents. Okay, but she makes purchases, so then now her balance goes back up. So you got to add $75 here. So she's going to end up with that'll be 6, 8. Okay, so she's got $486.73 that she's owing on the card now. Okay, and now she's going to be responsible to pay interest on this new amount. Okay, so we can take 486 with 73 cents, and we're going to have to multiply it times that percentage, right? Because that percentage came from here, right? That was the APR divided by the 12 months. So that's going to be consistent for us. We can just continue to multiply by 0.0133. All right. Okay, so let's find out how much interest she's going to have to pay on this balance. So we got 486 with 73 cents times 0.01333. Okay, so it looks like she's going to have to pay $6.49. All right. So now, since that's what she has to pay in interest, now then we can add those $6.49 onto her existing balance. Okay. And if we do that, let's go ahead and do it here. We have 486 with 73 plus $6.49. So she's back up to 493 with 22 cents. Okay. So that's kind of like the internal calculations that that the banks do for you. And so typically, you know, if you're not doing it yourself, you know, that's kind of the process which it undergoes. So you have a balance, you might make a payment, great. If you make additional purchases to your account, then they'll say, okay, well, this is how much now this person owes. We're going to then calculate the interest based off of this new amount, right? After the payment and the purchases have gone through. And then that's where you see the multiplication times this small value, right? So it's a small percentage because again, they're splitting up your percentage across a whole year, all right? So you're not gonna pay 18% like at once, you're gonna pay it over the 12 months. So you're paying small amounts every month, okay? But you can see that if you make payments and purchases, it doesn't really drop your balance by much, right? So like if you're in that continuous process of like, okay, I made a payment, but let me go buy something else. I made a payment, let me go buy something else. Then you're gonna kind of constantly keep rolling over a balance, and you're gonna have debt that's just there all the time. Okay, so the biggest challenge is like having a credit card with no money that you owe on it, because then it makes you feel very comfortable. Like, oh, I could just put on my credit card, no biggie. So sometimes it's good to keep a balance to just remind you not to go and spend too much. Okay. But any questions on this process? I know, I think Ivan, you jumped in just a little while ago, and Luis, I think you jumped in before that. So are you guys doing okay? Are there any questions so far?
I'm good.
All right. Okay. All right, let's see. What do I want to do from here? So I think I'm gonna hold on. I need to pull in another problem because I kind of want to skip number 6 and 7. Yeah, so give me a sec. I'm gonna pull in a problem from the textbook real quick. Okay, so number 6 was just to create formulas. Again, sometimes creating formulas is like it's not super necessary, right? This is a process that you can do kind of like recursively, where you don't need formulas all the time. Sometimes the formulas can become overwhelming, right? Having too many formulas isn't necessarily a good thing. Okay, so let me move on to the next page and let's pull a problem from there. Okay, so we'll take a look at this last one, number 8, where we're gonna make only minimum payments. Okay. All right, so let's see what they're asking of us here. Okay, so in general, credit cards require a minimum monthly payment. Can you guys hold on? Can you guys see my screen first of all? Okay. All right. In general, credit cards require a minimum monthly payment that is a fixed percentage of your current balance. As you can infer from the credit card billing statement on 302, if you make only the minimum payment and no further charges, your balance will decrease very slowly, right? And we talked about that going back over here, right? They give you a projection of if you start with a balance, right? Let's say 1,935, and you're only making minimum payments of $48, it's going to take you about 7 years to pay that off. And in the meantime, because you paid it off in such a slow amount of time, you ended up making a lot of payments just to the interest. Okay, and so it tells you how much you will actually pay, right? Instead of paying off your balance, all of the extra interest is going to make you end up paying $3,263 instead. Okay, so this problem is a little bit of a reference to that first one. Okay, so right, it says refer back to the responses to the think about the situation and Natalie's most recent credit card billing statement. And that's what we just looked at. Assume Natalie makes no further purchases on the credit card and each month makes the minimum payment. Okay, so she's not going to spend any more, but she's just going to kind of chug away with this minimum payment. All right, calculate the new balance after Natalie makes her first minimum payment, then calculate the minimum payment due for March. Okay, so let's kind of start here with what she has. Let's actually go back because we're going to need some key information here. From number So she has a balance of 1935 with 72 cents. Actually, I have it right here. Look at it. 1935 with 72 cents. Okay. The minimum payment that is required is 48 with 39 cents. And then something else that they tell us here is that she has a finance APR that's equal to 17.2%. Okay. And we need that, right? Because even though you make a minimum payment, then what they're going to want to do next is they're going to see whatever balance you have left over and they're going to multiply it times your APR and then they're going to tack it back on, right? So we need to know that APR. Okay. All right. So let's go back here. All right. So calculate the new balance after Natalie makes her first minimum payment. Okay. So then we have to first, we start with the balance, 1935. 72 cents. Okay, she makes a minimum payment, so we get to subtract 48.39. Okay, and let's see what she gets here. Okay, so by making that minimum payment, she drops her balance to 1887 with 33 cents. Okay, but just like last time, right? Even though we know that this is what the balance drops to, now the bank is going to then say, okay, well, now we're going to make a finance charge, right? Because you have something there, we're going to still charge you an APR based on what you still owe. So then what happens next is they're going to take this amount and they're going to multiply it by your APR. Okay, first turn that into a decimal. So we're looking at 0.172. Okay, and because it's a compounded monthly situation, then we can divide this by 12. Okay, so by doing so, we can find out how much interest they're actually going to charge her based on that current balance. All right, so let's take 0.172 divided by 12. Okay, so that is the rate. Okay, and now we want to multiply this times 1887.33. Okay, so how much interest is she getting charged? It's $27 with 5 cents. Okay, that's the finance charge. All right, so 27 with 5 cents. Okay, so then now that this is this interest charge gets added back to this right here, the 1887 with 33 cents. Okay, so 1887 33 cents plus the 2705 83, this will be 14 9 11 9. Okay, so think about where she started. She made her payment, but then interest got added back into her balance, so she went from 1935 to only 1914. Right, she really didn't make that big of a dent. Even though the minimum payment was $48, it's really more like she only paid about $21 towards her balance, right? Towards the balance, because interest then kicked it back up to another level. So then now she's actually, right, if this was the balance at the beginning, now after 1 month, this is her new balance of 1914 with 38 cents. Okay. All right, let's see what else they want us to find out. So calculate the new balance, and then after she makes her first payment, which we did, right? So 1914 with 38. And then also calculate the minimum payment that's due for March. Okay. Find the minimum payment that now she has to pay. Okay, well, remember, the minimum payment is always adjusted compared to how much you owe. The less you owe, the smaller the minimum payment usually becomes. Or at least technically, right? Theoretically, that's how it should work. Okay. When we found what percentage the minimum payment was way back in the think about the situation. So let's go back to find out what percentage, right? And it was right here for B, right? So the minimum payment of each month is a percentage of the new balance. Okay, we know our new balance. The percentage varies from one credit card to another, but what is the percentage for Natalie's credit card? Okay, so what is the percentage that she has to pay based on the new balance? Okay, so she has to pay 2.49%. Okay, that's what her minimum balance has to be. Okay, or minimum payment, minimum payment on the new balance. So then for us, because we have a new balance here of 1914, we need to know how much is 2.49% of this new amount. So what we can do is, if the minimum balance or the minimum payment has to be 2.49% of the new balance, right? Then we can just take this minimum payment percentage, turn it into a decimal, and we can multiply it to the new balance here. And then that should tell us how much she's gonna have to owe as far as a minimum, okay, the minimum payment. So when we multiply through here, we have 1914 with 38 cents times 0.0249. Okay, so her minimum payment has dropped a little bit, right? Remember, it was 48 something, now it's 47.67. Okay, so 47.67. Okay, so this right here is now the new minimum payment that she will have to make. And this one here represented the new balance for that month. Okay, so you have to find the new balance first before you can find out how it's going to affect the new minimum payment. Okay, but as the balance gets smaller, the minimum payment also gets smaller, at least according to this problem. All right. Okay. All right, so I think I'm gonna leave it off here because the rest is gonna take us some time. We're gonna do this for a couple of months. We're just gonna keep practicing, and then hopefully we can finish up this news section by maybe by Thursday, but if not, next week on Tuesday. Okay. All right, so we'll stop here.